Народные республики Донбасса обратились к России с просьбой о помощи. Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции. Ее цель – защита людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима. И для этого мы будем стремиться к демилитаризации и денацификации Украины, а также преданию суду тех, кто совершил многочисленные кровавые преступления против мирных жителей, в том числе и граждан Российской Федерации.
Hello everyone, this is in-depth analysis by Arinza. In this video, we are going to talk about why the war in Ukraine started, the point of view of Ukraine and Russia, whose story makes more sense. But before that, like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks. Before we talk about why the war started, let's wind back to what led to the war. Well, it all started post-World War II, during the Cold War, when the US wanted to influence Germany. You see, when Germany lost the World War II, the country was divided into two, Western and Eastern Germany, West Germany being controlled by US and Western allies, East Germany being controlled by the USSR or Soviet Union. But US wanted to unify Germany under their influence and admit them into NATO. They don't want a neutral or authoritarian Germany, so they set up a meeting with the then Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, in February 9, 1990, to discuss the unification of Germany. But the Soviet Union was worried of NATO expansion because the Berlin Wall was serving as a demarcation between the two military alliances then, NATO and Warsaw Pact. NATO being US military alliance with other Western powers like France, Britain and the rest. Warsaw Pact being USSR military alliance of Russia, Poland and the rest. So in order for US to convince the Soviet leaders, they promised not to expand NATO eastward, verbally no formal paper agreement. US Secretary of State James Baker said, I quote, "Not 1 inch eastward." Gorbachev agreed. Germany was unified and admitted into NATO. So USSR fell apart in December 1991. Many new countries were created, including Russia, Belarus and our beloved Ukraine. Mind you, as Ukraine was founded in 1991, it gave up its nuclear weapons it inherited from USSR, about 1,500 warheads, in Budapest Memorandum 1994, in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, US and UK. This is also one of the reasons UK and US are supporting Ukraine, I guess. Another interesting thing Western media don't want you to know is that Russia's first president after the collapse of USSR, Boris Yeltsin, suggested to NATO. In fact, he wrote a letter to NATO suggesting that Russia is open to the idea of joining NATO. Interesting, right? Given the fact NATO was created primarily to attack or defend against Russia, do you know what NATO did? They declined, probably because it's bad for military-industrial complex, or US didn't want to share influence in NATO. After declining Yeltsin's proposal, in 1999, NATO broke their promise and expanded eastward. Czech Republic, Hungary and Poland joined NATO. It didn't stop there. In 2004, NATO doubled down, admitting the Baltic states and 4 more countries, namely Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia and Slovenia. But before 2004 expansion, Vladimir Putin had become the Russian president in 2000. He also said in an interview with BBC they would consider joining NATO if they would be treated as equals by the US. He also re-emphasized on that last year being 2024. In an interview with Tucker Carlson, he told Tucker Carlson when Clinton was here, I asked, "What do you think about us joining NATO?" He said that's an interesting idea. Let me talk to my team. Then he went and talked to his team. He came back to Putin and said, not now, maybe later. So clearly, NATO is never interested in accepting Russia into NATO. You won't hear this in Western mainstream media. Putin didn't stop there. He tried to build trust and good relationship with the US, like when the 9/11 happened. He showed tremendous support to US. He condemned the terrorist attack as a barbaric act. He also supports the war in Afghanistan against Al-Qaeda and Taliban, including opening Russia's airspace for US and NATO flights. All this before the 2004 NATO expansion. During the 2007 Munich Security Conference, Putin gave a speech which was the first by a Russian leader. During his speech, he warned against NATO eastward expansion and made it clear Russia was ready to defend its interests and take a more active role in shaping the global order and will not abide by any subordinate role in international affairs. NATO ignored him and admitted 2 more states into NATO in 2009, Albania and Croatia. Before I forget, in 2008, former US President George Bush Jr. pushed for Ukraine and Georgia NATO membership, and this is where Russia started considering actions rather than wars. In August 2008, Russia invaded Georgia. Although then Putin was no longer the president, but a Russian general, Baluyevsky, later said in 2012 that President Putin had decided to invade Georgia and issued orders for military actions before the May 2008 inauguration of Dmitry Medvedev as president of Russia. From 2008 to 2012, Putin wasn't the president of Russia, so he had time to watch how NATO were going after authoritarian regimes: Gaddafi death, Arab Springs 2010 to 2011, Ben Ali from Tunisia, Hosni Mubarak of Egypt. He knew Russia was a target too, so he returned and ran for president in 2011. He won, but that incited a massive Russian protest, also known as Snow Revolution, allegedly funded by Western NGOs, with chants like "Russia without Putin" and United Russia Party of Russia is the party of crooks and thieves. United Russia Party is Putin's political party. Putin became president and started crackdown on dissidents, restricted NGOs, and used anti-Western rhetoric to undermine oppositions. Putin blamed the protests on foreign interference, particularly from US, and accused Western-funded NGOs of inciting unrest. He passed a law in 2012 requiring NGOs receiving foreign funds to register as foreign agents. Now into the most interesting part where Ukraine comes into the picture fully. Before we continue, consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Thanks. In 2010, a pro-Russian president came in power in Ukraine. His name was Viktor Yanukovych. Yanukovych stood for economic modernization, greater economic ties with the EU, and non-military alignment. But in November 2013, Yanukovych suddenly withdrew from signing of association agreement with the EU amidst economic pressure from Russia. Ukraine's parliament had overwhelmingly approved finalizing the agreement. This sparked a massive protest in Ukraine against Yanukovych, known as Euromaidan. The protest became so intense and taking many protesters' lives. Yanukovych had to flee the capital to Moscow in February 21, 2014. Mind you, this is not the first protest against him. Yanukovych first ran for president in the 2004 election, where he won against Viktor Yushchenko. However, allegations of electoral fraud and voters' intimidation with an allegedly sprinkle of foreign NGO support caused widespread protests, known as the Orange Revolution. East Europe and revolutions though. So Yanukovych was impeached in 2014 because he refused to join EU and NATO and wanted Ukraine to be a neutral state in order not to anger Russia or the West. But apparently, the West doesn't want neutrality. It's either you are for them or against them. That same year, 2014, when the Maidan Revolution was going on, Russia annexed Crimea Peninsula, which was part of Ukraine. Going forward, this sparked bad blood between Russia and NATO. In 2017, NATO expanded once again, where Montenegro joined the alliance. In 2020, North Macedonia joined too. While this was ongoing, NATO and Russia were pissing each other off with military exercises, cyber attacks, and disinformation campaigns from both sides. Things really escalated when Ukraine grew NATO aspirations and declared NATO membership as a strategic goal in 2019, also enshrining it in their constitution. NATO also began assisting Ukraine financially and militarily. Russia viewed this as a direct threat to their security. In 2021, Russia amassed a military build-up near Ukraine border, citing security concerns, opposing NATO expansion. NATO accused Russia of planning to invade Ukraine. Then, in December 2021, Russia makes its demand to the West that a guarantee Ukraine would never join NATO and removal of NATO infrastructure from Eastern Europe. NATO rejected those demands affirming Ukraine's right to determine its alliance, breaking promises made by US Secretary of State James Baker not 1 inch eastward. I know some of you will say there was no written agreement, which is true. But do you remember the 1962 Cuban crisis? America and Soviet Union resolved it and agreed to remove missiles near each other's country, verbally too. No written agreement or treaty. So back to 2021, after NATO rejected Russia's security demands. Couple of months later, February 24, 2024 to be precise, Russia invaded Ukraine. Fact remains Ukraine is a sovereign country and has the right to make its own decision regarding their security concerns. But come on, seeking for your own security at the expense of your neighbor, that neighbor being Russia. Well, we condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine here in In-Depth Analysis. This is all I have for now. Tell me in the comment section who you think is right between Russia and NATO/Ukraine. Thanks.